All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are tackling one of the biggest turning points in English history, the Norman Conquest. And we're going to break down exactly how this one event managed to cause, as our source material puts it, a truckload of trouble.
So let's start with the main question right out of the gate. How did they do it? How did the Normans unleash this so-called truckload of trouble? Well, to answer that, we've got to rewind the clock to the very beginning of 1066.
Okay, here's where it all kicks off. The trouble starts, as it so often does with a huge power vacuum. In January of 1066, the King of England, Edward the Confessor, dies. Now here's the problem, the really big problem. He has no kids, no clear heir to take the throne. And that one fact is basically the spark that's about to set the whole kingdom on fire.
And you know what happens with a power vacuum, right? It doesn't stay empty for long. Suddenly, you've got three incredibly powerful men all saying, that crown is mine. First, you've got Harold Godwinson. He's the English insider, the most powerful noble in the land, and the guy the English council actually chose. Then there's William of Normandy, who claims the old king promised him the throne years ago. He's even got the Pope on his side. And just to make things interesting, you have Harald Hardrada, the terrifying king of Norway, a Viking warrior with his own claim. So 3 men, 3 armies, and a kingdom that's about to be torn apart.
It really didn't take long for that political trouble to explode into full-blown military trouble. This wasn't just a squabble anymore. England was about to face 2 massive invasions at the same time from completely opposite directions.
And just look at this timeline. It is absolutely relentless for poor King Harold. On September 20th, Harald Hardrada, the Viking, invades the north and wins a battle. So what does Harold do? He forced marches his army an incredible 300 kilometers in just a few days. And on the 25th, he completely crushes the Vikings at Stamford Bridge, a massive victory. But, and this is a huge but, while he's up there, William of Normandy lands his entire army on the south coast. So Harold's army, who are completely exhausted, have to turn right around and march all the way back down the country to face a fresh, rested Norman force. It was just an impossible situation.
And this all comes to a head at the famous Battle of Hastings. You've got 2 very different armies here. The English have the advantage of the high ground and their legendary shield wall, basically a human fortress of shields and spears. But remember, they are dead tired and they have no cavalry and very few archers. The Normans, on the other hand, have it all: archers to soften up the enemy, infantry, and their ultimate weapon, knights on horseback. They use these forces together with a really clever trick of pretending to retreat, which tricks some of the English into breaking their shield wall, and that was the beginning of the end.
After a long, brutal day-long slugfest, it happens. King Harold is killed. And with their king gone, the English army just falls apart. The battle is over. And on Christmas Day, 1066, William of Normandy is crowned King of England. Just like that, centuries of Anglo-Saxon rule were finished.
Now, you might think, okay, battle's over, story's over. But you'd be wrong. Winning a single battle is not the same as controlling an entire country. William was now king, sure, but he was a foreign king ruling a very angry and hostile population. The trouble was far from over. In a lot of ways, it was just getting started. And the English did not go quietly. As you can see here, resistance popped up everywhere. These weren't just small, isolated incidents. We're talking major rebellions erupting all over the country, in the southwest, on the Welsh border, in the east. And the biggest of all was in the north, which even got backup from Danish Vikings. William was basically trying to hold the lid on a kingdom that was constantly about to boil over.
So how did William respond to all this defiance? With absolute terrifying brutality. His campaign in the north became known as the Harrying of the North. And it wasn't a war, it was an act of mass destruction. He ordered his armies to burn villages, salt the fields, destroy crops, kill livestock. This quote from someone who lived through it says everything. Widespread famine, thousands of deaths, abandoned villages. This was a message designed to obliterate any hope of future rebellion.
Alongside pure terror, the Normans had technology on their side. Their #1 tool for control was a new kind of fortress, the Motte and Bailey Castle. It was a simple but genius design, a wooden tower or keep on a big man-made hill called a motte, which overlooked a defended courtyard. The best part for William? They could be built super quickly using forced English labor. Hundreds of these things popped up all over England, a constant physical reminder to everyone of who was in charge now.
But here's the thing about William. He didn't just want to keep the English down. He wanted to fundamentally remake the entire country. He was going to rewrite the rules of English society from the very top to the very bottom.
And his tool for this was the feudal system. Think of it like this pyramid of power. Right at the top, you have the king, William, who declares he owns all the land, period. He then gives out huge chunks of it to his loyal Norman barons. In return, they owe him soldiers and loyalty. Those barons then give out smaller bits of land to their knights for military service. And way down at the bottom, you have the English peasants, working the land for their new foreign landlords. By 1086, pretty much every single Anglo-Saxon landowner had been kicked out and replaced by a Norman, a total transfer of wealth and power.
And that brings us to a really crucial year, 1086. It's been 20 years since the invasion, and William decides it's time to get a complete accounting of his new kingdom, to tighten his grip once and for all.
And to do that, he created something incredible, the Domesday Book. You can think of this as the ultimate, most detailed audit in history. His officials went to every single town and village and recorded everything: who owned what, how many pigs they had, how many mills, how many people, and the purpose was dead simple. William wanted to know exactly how much wealth was in his kingdom so he knew exactly how much he could tax. It was called the Domesday Book because people said its judgment was as final as God's on Doomsday. You couldn't argue with it, and you certainly couldn't hide from it.
And this Norman takeover was total. It even reached into the church, which was the absolute center of medieval life. William kicked out senior English bishops and replaced them with his own Norman loyalists. And then he started building these massive, imposing new cathedrals in the heavy, powerful Norman style. These buildings were powerful symbols in stone of the new Norman order.
So, let's bring this all together. Let's look at the verdict. When we talk about that truckload of trouble, we're not just talking about one battle in 1066. We're talking about a profound, deep, and permanent transformation of an entire nation.
I mean, the scale of the change was just staggering. Politically, the old rulers were gone, replaced by a new French-speaking elite. Socially, the feudal system completely changed how everyone lived. All the land changed hands. The landscape itself was permanently altered by all those castles. And culturally, the French language and customs started to blend with the old Anglo-Saxon ways. It was a revolution in every sense of the word.
Which leaves us with one last big question to think about. Was this truckload of trouble simply the brutal, violent end of the Anglo-Saxon world, or was it also the violent birth of the nation that England would one day become? Was it a destructive end or a brutal but necessary new beginning? That right there is the incredibly complicated legacy of 1066.